CyberArk is a privileged access security tool. Before we understand what CyberArk is, before we go into technical details of what CyberArk is, we need to understand what privileged access is. Okay. So anyone knows what privileged access? Anyone does this term look familiar? Are accounts that privileged accounts are the accounts that have highest privileges in the target systems. Let's say when you log into your office laptop or a workstation or a desktop, sometimes you might have noticed that they don't allow you to install any software or make any changes in the system. And they ask you for a credential and you'll have to type in a credential, and only when the credential is an admin credential, it would work. Okay. So activities in the systems that can only be done through a privileged account, through a highly capable account, those type of accounts will be called privileged account. Any accounts that has higher abilities in the system. What kind of higher abilities? The account will be able to make any server level changes or configurational changes, create users, remove users, define permissions of user accounts, install softwares, right? All these kind of changes that will count as a privileged activities, and the account that has these abilities will be called a privileged account. Accesses that flows through these type of accounts are called privileged access. Okay. Privileged access can be found everywhere in any device that you choose. For your Windows servers, there is going to be an administrator account. For your Linux server, there is going to be a root account. Right? For database, it's going to be a sysadmin account. So every device that you choose, there will be a privileged account built in, created at the start of while building the device, so that the user can manage that particular device. Even your smartphones have a particular privileged account created inside it. So it's called, there will be a root account that your service center might use to reset the phone, right? Privileged account will be created in every electronic device, even the printers and routers, everything. Types of privileged users. There are two types, basically interactive accounts or non-interactive accounts. Let's understand the type of the privileged accounts and what would we be focusing in this CyberArk Core Pass course. So there is interactive account. When a user logs into a laptop or a workstation, any system, and he types the username and password, gets inside the system, that means he is interacting with the account. Okay, if any password change is required, the user is going to do it by himself. If any policy change or if any permission elevation is going to be required, the user is going to do it by himself. Okay, so on daily basis, the user is interacting with the account. These type of accounts that are being used by humans to log into the system and perform activities are called interactive accounts. Examples: super user account. Super user, that means the highest privilege account that you can have in any server or any system. For Linux, it's going to be root. For Windows, local administrators will be there. Okay. Active Directory domain admin accounts will be another example. Does anyone know what Active Directory is? Does anyone know what Active Directory is? If not, Active Directory is a virtual repository of your resources where all the resources will be stored within your organization, like your servers, your workstations, your user accounts, your privilege accounts. Everything will be created and stored in the Active Directory. Active Directory basically acts as a network zone for your organization. Now, sometimes to manage all the resources that you are storing, it can be thousands of servers. Sometimes to manage all these resources you're storing, you create an administrator account inside the Active Directory that will be able to make some changes on the repository, make some changes on the resources that are stored in the repository, maybe reset password for your user accounts, maybe perform some maintenance task on your Active Directory. on your servers. So Active Directory domain admins accounts will be created for that particular purpose, and it is also an example of interactive accounts. Users, your Active Directory support team or administrator team, will be using these accounts to log into the systems and perform maintenance tasks. Okay. Same goes for your local administrator and system admin for databases. These accounts are basically locally created within the particular systems and dedicated to that particular system, and these accounts can be used for maintenance purposes. Okay. So these are interactive accounts, the one that can be used by humans to log into the systems and perform tasks that are only possible through a privileged account. So these accounts will be called interactive privileged accounts. We'll be talking more about that. Another example, another type of privileged accounts are called non-human accounts or non-interactive accounts. Non-interactive accounts are basically the accounts that are mapped in some applications or some scripts, and these applications or scripts are automatically using these credentials to log into the target servers. Okay, automatic logins are being done. Just give me 1 minute. Accounts are basically the accounts that are being used in some application or some scripts. These application or scripts are continuously using these accounts to log into the target systems and perform their functionalities without any human intervention. Okay, so no interaction with humans at all, and the accounts are being used for automated logins and functions. Let's understand the non-interactive accounts with a few examples here. Hard-coded credentials. Does anyone know what hard-coded credentials are? Let's say there is a script that needs to log into hundreds of servers in a certain period of time, a very short period of time, and it needs to push its functionality to all the 100 servers. Okay. Let's say it want to do it in 1 hour. So will it be possible for humans to log into 100 servers in 1 hour and push the functionality? Even if it is possible, it's going to be a lot of manual work. Okay. So a lot of organizations write the username and password within the script, and the script can use that username and password written within the code snippet. The script can use that username and password to log into the target systems automatically. Yeah, the script can use the username and password written within the script to log into servers automatically and perform its functionalities. So these type of credentials that are embedded within the code in a plain text, these type of credentials will be called hard-coded credentials. Okay. Another example of non-human accounts or non-interactive accounts, services. Basically services. So ever heard or ever interacted with this window here, services? Anyone know what this is? If not, services are basically a set of tasks that are performed automatically by a particular application. Let's say you install an application inside the server, and the application needs to perform some work on its own, some work automatically. It cannot depend on humans to do that. It's going to create a service in the server, and service is going to perform those tasks automatically for the application. Sometimes these services might need to log into other servers as well to perform their task. So these services will, how does anyone logs into other systems? They need a credentials, right? So we'll be mapping the credentials within the service itself. We'll be mapping the credentials within the service itself. We'll be writing the username and password here. Hope you are able to see my entire screen. We'll be mapping the credentials within the service itself. We'll be writing the username and password, and the service can use this username and password to automatically log into the system and push its functionality. Without any manual intervention, this functionality will work. The service will automatically use the username and password defined within the service to log into the systems. These type of accounts, these type of credentials are called non-human accounts or non-interactive accounts. Okay. Basically, no interaction with humans at all. Now, in any privileged access security implementation, whether you are doing CyberArk or Thycotic or beyond just any privileged access security implementation, the first priority is always going to be interactive or human accounts. Why? Because these type of accounts are most capable accounts, most sensitive accounts in the organization, and the passwords are exposed to humans. That makes it more prone to the damages. The passwords are exposed to human. That makes it more prone to the damage. So priority number one, interactive accounts. Non-interactive accounts are privileged credentials as well, but the passwords are not as exposed as the interactive ones. So we'll keep it for second priority in any privileged access security implementation. Non-human accounts are going to be the second priority. The first focus is going to be on interactive accounts. Once you have successfully managed your interactive accounts, non-interactive accounts will be the next phase of the project. Okay. So CyberArk has another module to manage non-interactive accounts called CyberArk Application Access Manager. We'll talk more about it in coming sessions, but the focus will be on interactive privilege accounts. Any questions? Quickly move on to the next section we have, that is risk associated with privilege account. With each of the privilege accounts that you create in the organization, there are certain risks associated with it. Okay, so as many privilege accounts that you create, the risk becomes even greater. How do we manage these risks, and what are these risks? What happens if we do not secure our privilege accounts? Okay. Let's understand the situations with three use cases. Let's talk about the Active Directory domain account first. Active Directory domain administrator account is the account created on the repository which has access to, which basically stores all the resources that you have. Let's say you are a large corporation and you have 10,000 servers in an organization. This Active Directory domain admin account will have access to all these servers, and not only access, it will have administrative capability on all these servers. Okay. So one set of username and password can be used to log into all these 10,000 servers. One set of username and password can be used to log into all these 10,000 servers. And if not only login, it will have the administrative capability. So if this account gets compromised, you're putting your entire systems at risk. This is how sensitive, this is how powerful a single credentials can be in an organization. And this account basically acts as a key to your infrastructure. So you do not want to lose these type of accounts, because if they get compromised, your entire infrastructure is at risk. Okay, so these are keys to your infrastructure. You do not want to lose them. Second, your accounts needs to be centralized. Okay? Your accounts needs to be centralized. What do I mean by centralized here? There should be a centralized repository for all your privilege accounts. Okay. Let's take an example to understand this, a situation to understand this. Let's say there is an application team that needs to build an application and they need a server for that. Okay. They need a server for that. So they will raise a request to the infrastructure team to create a server for them. The infrastructure team, when they created a server, they created a built-in administrator account, a local built-in administrator account along with the server, so that they can use this account to perform maintenance task and operations task for user creation, pushing patches, right? All those stuff. So they created this account and they handed over the server to the application team. As soon as they handed over the server, the application team installed their application and they built their own application administrator account. Okay. They built their own application administrator account. In the application, when the application team got the server, they installed their own application and they built their application administrator account. So now we have two administrator accounts, two privileged accounts in one server being managed at two different places. Okay, two privileged accounts in one server being managed at two different places. one with the server administrator team, one with the application team. And if this is the process that you follow, it's going to be the case with all the servers that you have. If you have 10,000 servers, for all of them, accounts will be managed at two different places. If an auditor wants to audit the activities of these privileged accounts, they'll have to go to server team first in order to retrieve the server administrator accounts activity. And then they'll have to go to application team to retrieve the application administrator's activity. The process is going to be too much complicated for them. So they might miss out on very important details. Auditing will not be done properly in this case. So this is where CyberArk solutions like CyberArk can help you. They offer a repository for all the privilege accounts, offer a central repository for all the privilege accounts, whether it is built on the server end or whether it is created on the application level or whether it is created on database level. All the privilege accounts can be onboarded to CyberArk, and once it is onboarded, users will have to, if they want to use these privilege accounts, they'll have to authenticate themselves in CyberArk, and only then they can use the accounts to connect to the servers. And in this process, CyberArk is going to keep a track of it, that which user has used the account to connect to what server and what are the activities that they did. So auditors' job will be very easy in this case. All they need to do is log into CyberArk and all the details will be waiting for them in one central place. All the application administrator accounts activity, server administrators account activity will be recorded, and auditors will be able to see all of that. Okay. So they will not miss out in on any important detail. Auditings will be done properly in this case, right? Third, accountability should be there. Accountability should be there. So if you are using a privilege account inside a organization, if you are using a sensitive credential, you should be accountable for your actions. You should not do some unauthorized activities and get away with it. Let's say I have the username and password of a particular server. Okay. I initiated this remote desktop connection client. Anyone know what this is? Anyone knows what this remote desktop connection client is? If not, this is a connection client. This is an application that lets you connect to the servers remotely from your local machine. It lets you connect to the servers or any workstations if you have a proper account remotely from your local machine. So I have the IP address here. I have the administrator account. I'll click on connect. I know the password. As soon as I log into the server, I'll perform some unauthorized activity. Maybe I'll delete some user accounts, or maybe I'll share some files with someone who is not authorized to do so. Okay. So who knows that Sanjeev has logged into the target server and performed all these activities? Who knows that Sanjeev has logged into the target server and performed all these activities? Because the logs are going to say that administrator account has logged in and did all this work. Okay? Logs are going to say that administrator account has logged in and did all this work. Unless they track my IP, that's not really possible. So in this case, I can even get away with any unauthorized activities or activities that I wasn't supposed to do. I can get away with all of that. This should not happen. To prevent all of this from happening, CyberArk solutions like CyberArk can restrict the direct access to the servers by rotating the passwords frequently. So as soon as they change the password, I would not have access to the password, and I would not be able to initiate direct connections. If I want to connect to the servers using the administrator account, if I have a genuine requirement and if I have the proper authorizations in place, I'll have to log into CyberArk, authenticate myself, and then use the account to connect to the servers. In the CyberArk, it's not going to expose the passwords to me. It's going to initiate a connection on my behalf using administrator account. And any activities that I do inside the target server when I'm logged in with CyberArk is going to be monitored My entire session is going to be recorded in video format. So auditors, even a simple cursor move will be visible for the auditors. And I know that I'm being recorded, so I'll act responsibly. This is how CyberArk is going to ensure accountability, okay? Making sure that if the end users are using a sensitive credentials in an organization, they are accountable for their actions. Okay. Along with that, there are certain regulatory bodies in place. So if you have ever worked with the banking domain, there is a SOX compliance or a payment card interface compliance. If you have ever worked with healthcare, there is a HIPAA compliance. All these regulatory bodies have certain standards in place which your organization needs to follow. And if the organization fails to follow these type of standards and they get their infrastructure compromised, there can be fines imposed on them. Okay? There can be fines imposed on them. These fines will usually be hefty. So, what happens when you lose your privilege accounts and get your infrastructure compromised? You lose your data, you lose your business, existing client, you damage your reputation, you get fined by these regulatory bodies, you get involved in lawsuits. Not an ideal situation to be. So this is why companies these days are looking to implement privileged access security in their organization. This is why this demand is even growing, and this is how CyberArk is going to mitigate the risk of your uh, privileged access security implementation. Any questions so far? Forward. So let's say if you are investing so much in a privileged access security solution, let's say you are investing so much in a privileged access security solution, there should be some expectations how the solution is going to manage your privilege accounts. There should be some expectations on how the solution is going to manage your privilege account. So there are some standard features that you need to look out for. First, the ability to manage the passwords. You should be able to define the policies. You should be able to say something like every 30 days or every 60 days, the password of my privilege account should automatically change. You should be able to define the complexity of the password, like how frequent, what would be the number of characters that your passwords include? Does it include any special character? Does it include any digits? All of those policies you should be able to define, and the solution should be able to read those policies in order to execute the password changes. The automatic password changes will be triggered, and this can avoid the risk of keeping static passwords for a longer period. Yeah. Second, the ability to limit the access to the privilege accounts. Uh, Imposing the least privilege method. If you are familiar with least privilege method, if you're not familiar with the least privilege method, let me give you a simple example. So let's say a developer needs to log into a server and perform some small code changes. Okay. Developer needs to log into the server and perform some small code changes. Once you cannot provision the developer's access to an administrator account because he does not want to do any server level changes, or he does not want to create an account or do any maintenance task. Okay? You do not want to give them access to an administrator account. Instead, if he needs to do some code changes and and he needs to log off from the server, all you need to do is just create a read-only account for them and provision the access through CyberArk. So only those privileges will be provided that are really required for the individuals to complete their task. Okay? Only those privileges will be provided that are really required for individuals to complete their task. That is called least privilege method, and solutions like CyberArk can help you achieve that in your organization. Audit trails should be there, detailed audit trails, logs as in which user is using what account to connect to what server at what time, what was the session duration, Session monitorings will be done. That means activity tracking of what user is initiating which applications at what time in which servers. So if a user goes to a server, the user connects to a server using a privileged account and initiates a control panel or a notepad, all those will be recorded in a text format saying that this user has initiated a control panel window or a notepad window or application 1, application 2 at this particular time. Along with that, the entire session will be recorded in video format for auditors to see any keystroke logins, as in any high privilege command that you execute in a command line interface, such as Linux servers. Those commands will be recorded in a text format as well. So, for example, if you do a add user command, or if you do a sudo to root command, all those commands will be recorded in the text format. Detailed audit trails and logs will be there for auditors to see for auditors to have a greater visibility on the privileged accounts activities. Multi-factor authentication, before the user are able to reach to your privileged accounts, they'll have to go through 2 factors of authentication. Anyone understands multi-factor authentication here? So multi-factor authentication is basically a layer of security in your authentication process. It helps you avoid the user impersonation issues. So whenever a user types in the username and password, he'll have to go through another factor of authentication. Most common example will be one-time password. You might have noticed while you log into your banking websites, you might have they might have issued one-time passwords to you, okay, OTPs which you get in your phone. So they make you go through another factor of authentication after the username and password. That's what we are doing here. We are integrating CyberArk with multi-factor authentication so that users do not only have to provide the username and password, they'll have to go through one more factor of authentication. And this MFA can be integrated by a lot of other solutions in the market. CyberArk does not have a MFA solution of its own, but it can integrate with a lot of basically all the other solutions out there. So Okta, Radius, Duo, RSA tokens, all of this can be integrated with CyberArk to achieve the MFA functionality. Session management should be there. Session monitoring, as in the activity tracking of your users, which user is initiating what activities on what servers. If the users are initiating a control panel window or a notepad window or any applications in the target server, the logs would specifically name those applications and the time of the initiation of those applications. Okay. Session recordings, the entire video recording of the session. Okay. Session isolation, that means preventing the data overlap between 2 sessions if they are initiated using the same user account. So let's say if there is a generic account, there is an administrator account. I use the same account to connect to a server, and I opened a text file, wrote some sensitive details, maybe my passwords or maybe organizational level details that anyone else was not supposed to see. I saved that text file in the server, logged off. When another user uses the same administrator account that I use to log into the server does not recognize individual users here. All the server sees that the generic account, the administrator account, is logging in again, and it's going to resume the old session. My old session will be resumed. That means my files will be visible to the other user. So this is what we want to prevent. We want to make sure that the isolation is in place and it's not allowing the user to see the same set of information. It's not allowing the users to see the information that I had saved. And even if they are initiating the connection with the same user account, the data will not overlap between these 2 sessions. So that's what we are going to learn more about session monitoring and isolation and what happens, how does the monitoring, recording, and isolation works in backend. So what is the technical processes that are related? We'll talk more about it, but this is what session management functionalities have to offer. Temporary access should be there. So the solution, the tool should be able to provision temporary access based on the requirement. If a user wants access to a particular account for 2 hours, we should not be provisioning a permanent access for them. So the access should be provisioned automatically after the approvals are in place. And once the time period expires, the access should be deprovisioned automatically. These are the capabilities. These are some standard features that any privileged access management solution should have. CyberArk or Audit or Beyond Trust, right? So we'll talk more about all of these features in coming sessions. We'll get to know more about how CyberArk approaches these type of risk and what is the CyberArk approaches. What is the CyberArk's approach to perform all these functionalities that are expected from a PAM solution. If not, yes.
So in the entire the complete entire sessions. So are we going to discuss about the only PAM solutions? Apart from this, is there any other topic?
So we are going to discuss about CyberArk and how do you implement the CyberArk, how do you perform administration tasks, what does CyberArk provides, how does CyberArk secures the infrastructure. We'll talk about the entire CyberArk functionality. Let me give you an overview. That's a good question, Amarnath. Let me give you a quick overview on the syllabus. Okay. So syllabus of the CyberArk course, module 1, we will be talking about the introduction, the privileged access management introduction. What are the risk areas? What are the pain areas? And how do we mitigate those risks? What is the expected solution from a privileged identity, privileged access management tool? We learn about CyberArk's approach to manage all these risks and high level architecture on the module 2, CyberArk overview. Module 3 will be solution components. So CyberArk has multiple components for multiple functionalities. We have Vault for a database. We have a password vault web access for a front-end UI. Session management component for the session management functionalities. Password manager component for all these component needs to be installed separately on a separate server. They are independent of each other and they will be performing the functionalities by communicating with the database. So we'll learn about all of these components. How do they work? How does the communication work? How does the functionality work? What is the backend process? All of this we'll try to spend 1 or 1.5 hours on each of the component, where we get to know the theory of each of the component, the communication functionality, all of that. Once we are fairly confident, once we are comfortable with the theory, we'll move on to the lab implementation part, where I will be provisioning access to 4 virtual machines, not 4, 5 actually, including the so 5 virtual machines on AWS cloud. Each of you will get access to these 5 virtual machines individually created for you, and CyberArk softwares will be copied inside these virtual machines. We'll be talking about each of these component installation. We'll be talking about the Vault installation and the PVW installation, the front-end UI. We'll learn the prerequisites, ports that are required for communication. We'll install our own Active Directory and integrate this Active Directory with the Vault. We'll build our own email notification engine solution, which triggers alert whenever something goes wrong with our infrastructure. So you get to build your own customized infrastructure, own customized CyberArk architecture on your personalized lab. I'll provide this install lab guide as well. So this includes all the installation steps along with the screenshot. So whatever we discuss on the session, you can even take a reference from here and go through all of this. You can even install and practice in your leisure time, right? Along with that, once the installation architecture building is complete, we'll talk about the policy configuration. So we'll talk about how do we configure master policies, how do we define password management policies, session management policies, and how do we control the user behavior and enforce the users to go through CyberArk connections instead of direct connections, right? We'll be talking about safe management, where we will learn about the safes are basically containers inside CyberArk to store separate accounts. So we'll have a separate safe for Windows, separate safe for Linux. We'll see how do we provision access, user access on the safes, and how do we provision user access on more granular level to each of the accounts that we are going to onboard inside CyberArk. Okay. We'll be onboarding Windows accounts, Linux account, network accounts, security accounts, security devices. We'll be talking about some use cases. What is the daily task of a CyberArk administrators? How do they onboard accounts inside CyberArk? What is the reconciliation? What is the password management process? We'll have a detailed session on reporting, auditing, and reporting. So where we get to learn how do we help our auditors to see the details that they need? Yeah, how do we help them to see the session recordings, right? We'll be having some troubleshooting sessions as well. So wherein we'll learn if any issues happens inside CyberArk. If let's say password management fails, CyberArk is not able to do password management for a particular account, how do we fix that? If any component failure happens, let's say if the UI goes down or if the vault goes down, how do we troubleshoot those kind of issues? Okay? And the last module is going to be a disaster recovery module, where we will learn how do we create a disaster recovery, a backup system for our primary vault, a primary database, and our components will be communicating with the disaster recovery whenever the primary vault is impacted, so that our users don't face interruption. We'll be setting all of that in the last module. And in the last module, we'll also do the demo disaster recovery drill. So we'll see how the failover and failback happens in real time. Okay. So this is the entire course content. This is what you can expect. Along with that, I'll provide access to administration exercise guides. So a lot of use cases are there, password management and user management, and you can basically refer to this exercise guide. You'll have the lab access for 30 days, and you can practice all you want from this exercise guide. Let me give you a. So all the policy rules, everything that we discuss on CyberArk sessions, administrative sessions, those topics are here. So you can take a reference from here as well and practice as much as you want. Okay. Along with that, I will provision the access to share the notes with you. So I have handwritten notes for each of the components, theory of each of the components. So we'll be discussing each of these modules in the session as well, but I have summarized all the topics that we discussed in the session, and I'll be sharing this notes to you as well. So this is what you get. Yeah.